Today we're going to do an angel iceberg here, meaning we'll go from what is most commonly known by the general public about angels, all the way to what is practically unknown. And starting right at the first layer, let's talk about what an angel actually is, right? Probably, when I say angel, the image that comes to your mind is a celestial being with wings, and it's probably cute. Well, angel comes from the Greek word angelos, and also from the Hebrew malak, which basically means messenger. They are present in various religions such as Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Angels, in general, are pure beings connected to God Himself and act as intermediaries between the Creator and humanity. And normally, or in theory, they wouldn't have a physical body. They are purely spiritual beings. I say this because, there are some stories where they even act with a physical body or can be represented as having a physical body. And besides being messengers, they can also act as guardians and protectors of humanity. We have, for example, guardian angels, who protect people against physical and also spiritual dangers. Angels are manifestations of order, care, and divine light in the physical world. And since I mentioned it here, in this layer we also have guardian angels, which are probably the most well-known type of angel there is. Every person in the world, as soon as they are born, receives an angel who acts as their individual protector. But besides protecting the person physically and spiritually, fighting against the dark arts, so to speak, the guardian angel also acts as an advisor, like a Jiminy Cricket. He keeps giving good advice, like he's the person's conscience, leading them to eternal salvation, inspiring good thoughts, and so on. Well, basically, the guardian angel is there, so people don't feel so alone when facing the adversities and difficulties of the world. Guardian angels are always closely associated with children. If you search for guardian angel on Google, you'll see images of them protecting children from cliffs and dangers in general. But at least in theory, according to tradition, guardian angels act throughout a person's entire life, not just during childhood. Since I mentioned children here, we can combine the two, right? Children and angels, and we'll have that image of cherubs that everyone knows, right? Those cute baby angels that are really adorable. But actually, cherubs aren't exactly like that. If you've read the Bible or if you've researched angels, you'll see that cherubs were monstrous guardians. They were angels with 4 heads, 3 being animal heads, an eagle, cattle, and an ox. They looked frightening. And sometimes, even according to what they say, they could kind of be the animals that pulled God's chariot. But over time, this image changed a little. A lot of it was because of the European artists who discovered, or actually rediscovered in this case, in Roman mythology, the putti. They were the cute beings that appeared in the form of chubby children. They represented love, innocence, that kind of thing, like, for example, Cupid, who you probably know, right? Actually, even Cupid was originally represented as a young adult, not as a child. With that then, influential artists of the time like Raffaello Sanzio, Donatello, and especially Michelangelo ended up combining this image of the putti with Judeo-Christian mythology. They changed the cherubs into cuter and more adorable beings, which ended up dominating the popular imagination and even made the original image of the cherub as a celestial warrior practically forgotten. Unlike you, who probably won't forget, right? Because you're a really good person. And leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and all that you already know. But mainly, if you can and want to help me even more, you can become a member here on the channel, having your name immortalized here in the video. Like, for example, these people who are showing up here on the screen. Besides that, you'll also get early access to videos and also to exclusive videos like the ones that are showing up for you. And there's another way you can help me too. You can go buy the products that are showing up here on the screen right now, like for example this PlayStation 5 here. Or you can also access the link in the pinned comment where you'll find lots of stuff. You'll find PlayStation, Nintendo, Xbox, books, and much more. Just click on the product that's showing up there or on the links and you'll already be helping me a lot, okay? And now we're going to start here with the second layer, talking about the Archangels, which would be a class of angelic beings that are pretty well known. In my view, this is the second most well-known class after angels. So I place them in the second layer. There are aspects of archangels many people don't know. And actually, these are things that can even change the way you see archangels. For example, the fact that an archangel isn't really a type of angel, but rather a type of angelic being. Because to be an angel, the being would have to be a messenger. And an archangel is not a messenger. Actually, it's a warrior being. In fact, in the Bible, this is another very interesting detail. The only being who is called an archangel is Michael. The others are not. That's never mentioned. And everyone knows that Michael's main role is to be a warrior, not a messenger. He leads God's army against the serpent, right, Satan? In Revelation, the others who are also known as archangels, like Gabriel and Raphael, for example, they are called archangels by the church, but not by the Bible. And in Gabriel's case, it's actually interesting that he's called an archangel since he really is a messenger. He is what an angel is supposed to be. He goes there and delivers the message that John the Baptist and Jesus were about to be born. That's right. Although other roles are also given to Gabriel, like, for example, being an angel of revelation. The angel who blows the trumpet at the final judgment. Maybe he also killed the firstborn in Egypt, things like that. In the case of Raphael, he is considered an archangel there, mainly by the Catholic Church, because in the book where Raphael is mentioned, the Book of Tobit, it is not considered canonical by Protestants. So that already creates some confusion in Raphael's case. But even in the Book of Tobit, when it is considered canonical, he is not mentioned as an archangel either, although it would actually make some sense. Because even though Raphael is called the Archangel of Healing, in this story of Tobit, he also ends up defeating the demon Asmodeus, which makes him be considered a kind of warrior as well. And then we have these three who would be the main ones. But according to some passages in the Bible, according to some interpretations, right? Like, for example, in the passage from Revelation, which says there would be 7 angels, or even in the book of Tobit itself, where Raphael says, right, that he would be one of the 7 holy angels. They say that there would actually be 7 archangels. But according to the church, only these 3 that I mentioned to you are cited. Now, as for the others that are missing, we could find answers in apocryphal books. But the names vary a lot, especially the last 3. The 4th isn't in the Bible, but is mentioned in the Orthodox Church. I'll discuss him later since he's not well known. The next topic is Lucifer's fall, the war, and the ritual of the fallen angels. It's all mixed together and placed in the second layer because a lot of people still don't know, or sometimes they just don't want to accept, that Lucifer and the fall of Lucifer itself are not in the Bible, at least not in the way people think, because a lot of people interpret the fall of the dragon in the book of Revelation as being the fall of Lucifer, that he supposedly fell to earth, then ended up going to hell, made his own kingdom, and now keeps tempting humanity. But actually, this fall in Revelation is still going to happen. It's in Revelation. So theoretically and technically, it hasn't happened yet. Then you come and say to me, yeah, but Emmy, in the book of Isaiah 14:12, it says, "You have fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn." So what happens is that this specific passage, it's not about someone who fell from heaven and tempts humanity. It's actually about ancient kings, like the kings of Tyre and Babylon. Many people interpreted the passage this way, partly due to translation errors, which ended up making the morning star be seen as Lucifer. And many people think that Lucifer in this case is a name, not an adjective. But even with all that, the first church fathers, like Origen and also St. Augustine, ended up interpreting this passage as actually being related to the fall of an angel. And sometime later, in 1667, John Milton went on to consolidate this version with his poem Paradise Lost, where he narrates exactly the fall of Lucifer along with other angels. He explains, how he built all of hell based on heaven itself. And with that, he would go on to tempt humanity. So this version of the story was already in everyone's mind. There was nothing else to do, right? In fact, in this poem, several pagan gods also end up appearing as well, like Ammon, Ra, etc., and even the god Beelzebub. Starting the third layer, let's talk here about the hierarchy of angels, or in this case, the hierarchy of celestial beings, right? Because as I told you, actually, right, angels are just one type of celestial being. Well, there are several hierarchies. Who comes first, who comes second, it varies a lot, but I'm going to use here the one that might be the most well-known, right, which is the one from Dionysius. In his work, The Celestial Hierarchy, he divided the angelic beings into 3 triads or 3 choirs, totaling 9 orders. He based this on the New and Old Testament. The higher the triad, the closer this being is directly to God, and the more contemplative it is. So starting with the 3rd triad, which would be the executors and the messengers. In this triad, the beings are closer to humanity. For example, we have the angels, which would be the most numerous order. They are the ones who take care of human beings, like the guardian angels. The archangels are God's warriors. They change the destiny of humanity, like Michael in the spiritual battle and Gabriel in the Annunciation. And the principalities. They are the angels who protect large groups. They guard nations, kingdoms, cities, churches, and even nature itself. In the second triad, we have the rulers of the universe. These beings are responsible for the order of creation, for managing the laws of physics and the cosmos. Here, we have the powers, who are the guardians of cosmic order, the warriors who fight demons, the virtues, known as the angels of miracles and grace. They are responsible for governing the laws of nature and the celestial bodies, and the dominations or dominions, who would be the bureaucrats or governors of heaven. They do not interact directly with humans. Their function is to regulate the duties of the angels who are below them and to ensure that the universe works according to God's will. And the first triad are those who contemplate God. They are extremely close to God. Here we have the thrones or ophanim, which would be the wheels in the Hebrew tradition. They are represented as wheels of fire and full of eyes. And they literally serve as the throne of God, representing divine justice and the stability of the governance of the cosmos. The cherubim are guardians of divine mysteries and holders of supreme wisdom, and the seraphim, the top of the hierarchy. Their name means the burning ones, or those who burn. In Isaiah, they're described as six-winged beings who burn with divine love, surround God's throne, and praise Him constantly. This also lets us discuss angelic hierarchy and form. A lot of people think that angels, in this case, have a human form because of images and illustrations of Archangel Michael, for example. Or they think that angels are strange, right? That they have various forms with many eyes or looking like wheels. You've probably seen on the internet an image that is split in half. On one side, there's Archangel Michael, and above him it says how people think an angel is. On the other side, there's a wheel full of eyes, and above it, it says how an angel really is. But as I told you, both of these forms are actually correct, because even though technically angels don't have a physical form, they have appeared in physical form in the Bible itself. For example, when three men appeared to Abraham, these three men were probably Raphael, Michael, and Gabriel. Or in the book of Tobit itself, where it says that Raphael walked among men in human form. But the wheel shape with many eyes is also not wrong, because in this case, that being would be one of the ophanim, also called a throne. In other words, the form of the angel or the form of the celestial being depends a lot on the class it belongs to. The next topic here is Metatron, which would be the pinnacle of celestial mysteries in Jewish mysticism. The figure of Metatron stands out mainly as one of the most enigmatic entities, one of the most imposing and powerful beings in all of angelology. Unlike most angels, who were created directly from divine thought according to some versions, the angel Metatron would actually have originally been human. Enoch, who was chosen by God to become his own scribe, thus becoming the angel Metatron. Being the seventh descendant of Adam himself, due to his righteousness and unparalleled wisdom, he ended up being taken up to heaven. Metatron's main attributes and characteristics are mainly being called the Little Yahweh, the Prince of the Presence, the Chancellor of Heaven, or even the Lesser Yahweh. As I also mentioned, he would be the celestial scribe, which is his main function. Right, to record everything in the cosmos. He guards the Book of Life and Celestial Chronicles, tracking humanity's sins, virtues, and secrets. There's also Metatron's cube, which, in sacred geometry, his name is associated with a powerful three-dimensional mystical symbol, composed of 13 circles and interconnected by lines that form the 5 Platonic solids. Metatron's cube is considered a map of creation, a tool for spiritual cleansing, and a strong amulet of protection against dense energies. And now let's talk about Uriel. As I mentioned to you before, right, that there was a fourth archangel who was considered by the Orthodox Church. This is the case with Uriel, whose name means the light of God. He is one of the most prominent archangels in Judeo-Christian apocryphal tradition, though not mentioned in the canonical Bible. Uriel would be the guardian of Eden and of hell in the mystical tradition. Uriel is often identified as the cherub who was placed at the gates of the Garden of Eden with a flaming sword to prevent the return of sinful humanity. He is also known as the angel of salvation. Uriel would be the archetype of the spiritual illuminator. He was the one who warned Noah about the imminent flood, and also the one who is said to have instructed the scribe Ezra about the secrets of the soul and the end of times. His energy is invoked by spiritual seekers to bring mental clarity. Discernment is the transformation of ignorance into essential wisdom. If I ended up closing the previous layer by talking about Metatron, I'm going to open this layer here by talking about his brother. Because, as incredible as it may seem, yes, Metatron, according to Jewish mysticism and Kabbalah, does have a brother. And not just any brother, but a twin brother, who is Sandalphon. Just like Metatron, he would be Enoch, who was taken to heaven for his righteousness, and so on. Here, Sandalphon is the prophet Elijah, a very fervent one, who was also taken up to the heavens in a chariot of fire, and ended up becoming Sandalphon, who would probably be the tallest angel in heaven. And in this case, I'm really talking about height, okay? Not in terms of greatness or power or anything like that, because they say that while his feet touched the earth, his head would reach the throne of God, and he would be so big, but so big, that if you started walking along his body, it would take you 500 years to finish that walk. He would have some functions. One of them is actually quite beautiful and poetic, because in this case, he would take the prayers, the supplications of people with his own hands and make crowns. He would place them on the Creator's head. My research also shows he helped choose the child's sex, telling the child if it would be a man, woman, or something similar, while the child was still in the mother's womb. Sandalphon's sound would also be that of the angel of music. Hey, and now let's talk about the Grigori. In this case, I've already talked a lot about them here on the channel. But like it or not, it's something that's actually quite unknown to the general public. The Grigori would be a race of celestial beings, or a type of angel if you prefer. In this case, they were created by God to watch over humanity. And no, they are not in the Bible. Although their children are mentioned in the Bible, they are mainly found in the book of Enoch. While they were watching over humanity, their leader, Samyaza, he ended up falling in love with the daughters of God, in other words, with women. Because of this, the angels came down and had some children, who would be the Nephilim. They ended up destroying humanity and attacking people, eating everything in their path, as I already mentioned. And when the archangels saw this, they ended up warning about it. God, who ordered them to destroy the giants, while he would send the flood over the earth to start everything over again. Then the archangels, with Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, captured these watchers, and they threw them into the abyss. These, in fact, according to this story, are the real fallen angels, but according to some, the spirits of the Nephilim, who would be the children of the watchers, also called giants, stayed on earth. And these are the ones who would tempt humanity, not actually Lucifer or Satan. Now let's talk about Abaddon, who is an angel mentioned in the Bible. Despite that, some say he would be a demon, mainly because of his role. According to the Bible itself, in the book of Revelation, it says that at a certain moment, Abaddon, upon hearing the trumpets of the angels, would come out of the abyss and bring his army with him, which would be the chimera locusts with various animal parts like a lion's head, a scorpion's tail, that kind of thing. And they would go against humanity and end up torturing it and so on. Because of this, some say that Abaddon would actually be a demon, but in the Bible itself, he is mentioned as an angel. Besides that, there are apocryphal books that talk about some curious things about Abaddon, that he would be a kind of angel of death, a reaper, and that he would have gone to the place where Jesus was buried to fetch the soul of Jesus. But at the moment he went there, Jesus ended up resurrecting and made Abaddon himself bow before him. In the case of this apocryphal story, it's from the book of Bartholomew. If you want to know more about the Watchers or about Abaddon himself, I have videos about both here on the channel. They'll be in the card and in the description for you. Now let's talk here about the origin of the angel Satan. Also about the difference between him and the other Satans from other very similar religions, right? In this case, I'm talking about Lucifer from Christianity, Samyaza from the book of Enoch, Satan from Judaism, Iblis from Islam, and of course Ahriman from the Persians. What happens is this: back in primitive Judaism, there was no idea of a devil. In fact, as the book of Isaiah from the Old Testament says, all good and all evil come from God. But all of this changed during the Babylonian exile of the Jews. The Jews had direct contact with Zoroastrianism from the Persians and learned about Ahriman. In Zoroastrianism, he represents all evil. Satan in Judaism would actually be a servant of God, an angel who tests humanity, like what happens with Job himself. That's why even in the story of Job, it's kind of strange to think that Satan would have come into contact with God and asked to test Job, right? Actually, this Satan would just be an angel, a servant of God himself. But up until then, we didn't have a story about how this Satan came to be or how he would have rebelled against God, right? How he would have gone against God's rules. That's where stories like Samyaza's come from, which I told you about. He would be the leader of the Watchers who fell from heaven because of the sin of lust, right? He wanted a human woman for himself. But when they were organizing the church's books, the church fathers thought that Samyaza's sin of lust was still too little. So they put the sin of pride, which was much more serious, onto this fallen angel. That's how the role of leader of the fallen angels shifted from Samyaza to Satan. Well, but the name Lucifer was only connected to this story of Satan when there was a translation error in the Bible, where in a passage they referred to the morning star as Lucifer. Well, now you understand the story of some of these devils, right? Ahriman, Satan, and Lucifer. But there's still the devil in Islam. In this case, the story of fallen angels didn't really catch on among Muslims because for them, angels don't have free will, right? They can't rebel against God. So the role of tempting humanity was given to another being, to another creature, which are the jinn or genies. They would kind of be like the brothers of the angels since they were also born in heaven. Iblis ended up refusing to bow before Adam, or the devil, right? Because of that, he was cast down to earth where he would tempt those who are far from Allah, not having permission to go near those who are close to him. Now let's talk about angels from other religions, which aren't exactly angels, but are very similar. For example, in Zoroastrianism, we have the Amesha Spintas, or the Holy Immortals, who are 6 direct emanations of the Supreme God, Ahura Mazda. Each one takes care of an aspect of creation like order, mind, or health. Below them are the Yazatas, who are lesser divinities that act as protectors and messengers. In Islam, we actually have angels, but like I told you before, they are a little different from the biblical angels, since they don't have free will. There are the Malaika, who would be the angels. They are fundamental pillars of faith, called Aqidah. The angels are said to be created from light. They don't have the freedom to choose anything. They are absolutely obedient to Allah. And there are the main ones, who would be Jibril, who would be the equivalent of Gabriel, and Mikael, who would be the equivalent of Michael. There are also specific figures, like Israfil, who would be the archangel that would blow the trumpet on Judgment Day, and Azrael, who would be the angel of death. In Hinduism, the concept of angels doesn't exist in the Western sense, but the roles of intermediaries and beings of light are filled by other categories. For example, there are the Devas, who would be the beings of light and the deities, and the Asuras, who would be the chaotic beings. But below them, the Gandharvas stand out, who would be musicians. Celestial beings inhabit the sky and serve as messengers. Apsaras are female spirits associated with dance and water. Digpalas are guardians of the universe's cardinal points. Now here I wanted to talk about a specific church, actually, in a way, even a specific part of that church. In this case, I'm talking about the medieval church of Banganarte, located in Sudan. This church was divided into 2 parts, the lower church, or Church 1, which was in use from the mid-6th century until the 11th century, and Church 2, also called Hapal, Raphaelion II, which was in use from the mid-11th century until the 18th century. Well, I think the name makes it pretty clear what I want to talk about here, right? Raphaelion, which was named in honor of its patron, the Archangel Raphael, who appeared gigantic in the paintings. And in this specific church, he appeared larger than all the other archangels, even larger than Michael himself. Now let's start here with the 6th layer, with the angels of the Kabbalah. In this case, the 72 angels of the Kabbalah. Well, in the Kabbalah, angels wouldn't just be winged messengers. They are cosmic forces, channels of spiritual energy, and extensions of divine consciousness itself. But they act as intermediaries. They help to emanate the light of the Creator, called Ein Sof, from the most spiritual plane down to our physical world. The structure of the Kabbalistic angels is based on 2 main pillars. First, the angels and the tree of life. This is about Kabbalistic cosmology. It contains 10 spheres of energy, called Sephirot. Each of these spheres represents an aspect of God in the universe, and each one is governed by a chief archangel who leads a specific choir of angels. We have Metatron, who governs the sphere called Keter, or the crown, which is at the absolute top of the hierarchy. Raziel, who is the guardian of divine secrets, governs Chokmah, or wisdom. Tzafkiel governs Binah, which would be understanding, associated with deep contemplation. Zadkiel, the angel of benevolence and mercy, who governs Chesed, which would be mercy. Kamael, who is the strong arm of justice and severity, governs Gevurah, which would be strength or judgment. Michael, who is the great protector, governs Tefere, which would be beauty and harmony. Haniel, the angel of love and grace, governs Netzach, which would be victory. Raphael, the celestial healer, governs Hod, or splendor. Gabriel, who is the messenger and the foundation of forms, governs Yesod, which would be the foundation. And Sandalphon, who is the guardian of our physical dimension, governs Malkuth, which would be the kingdom. The second pillar in this case would be the angelic choirs. That is, each of the angels that are part of these angelic choirs, when you add them all together, would make 72. I'm not going to mention all of them here, of course, but for example, among them we have Kaliel, who would be that angel who quickly helps in times of adversity. We have Rehayax, who grants protection against adversities, and Azalel, who favors marital fidelity, and so on. Another thing I want to add here in this layer is the idea that seraphim are actually ancient gods, or even lesser gods, who worship the supreme God, right? Yahweh. Okay? But this idea doesn't just come from here. Actually, it comes from other mythologies as well. For example, in Mesopotamia, there were some lesser gods who protected the greater gods. Or it could also come from the word seraphim itself, because even though seraphim means something burning, things like that, right? That's where the idea comes from, that seraphim were made of celestial fire. The word seraph, which forms seraphim, could also be used to refer to serpents. And when we talk about serpents, we can also go to Egypt, where there was the serpent Uraeus in this case. It was symbolized by a cobra with open wings. It was the supreme symbol of royal protection. It was connected to the serpent goddess, Wajet, and also to the sun god, Ra. They had the function of spitting fire against the enemies of the pharaoh and the enemies of the gods. And incredibly, in some scriptures, they were called seraph, because they burned the enemies. So this idea of protection by lesser gods ended up evolving into lesser beings who worship the greater God. In this case, the seraphim are always worshiping Yahweh. And now let's move on to the 12 archangels of the Zodiac, with each sign having its own archangel, of course. The sign of Aries would be connected to Maldikiel, who would be the one that brings the fire of enthusiasm and new beginnings. The sign of Taurus, Osmodeus. Osmodeus, yes, brings determination and the urge for beauty and for the comfort of the physical world. Gemini, the archangel Ambriel. He guards agile minds and information exchange. Cancer, Muriel, who is not about courage or cowardice, but actually the archangel who brings the energy of nurturing, empathy, and family love. Leo, Virtual, who channels solar fire and magnetism and generosity. Virgo, with Amaliel, who rules the search for perfection, analysis, and purification. Libra, Zuriel, who rules the cosmic balance. Scorpio, Barbiel, who is the guardian of the depths and mysteries. Sagittarius, Advakiel, who calls for optimism, adventure, and philosophy. Capricorn, Hanel, or also Cassiel, associated with the strength of structure and the energy of persistence. Aquarius, Cambiel, who rules thought, innovation, the breaking of old patterns, and gives great ideas for the future. Pisces, Barkiel, who guides mystical sensitivity and connection to the divine. Well, opening the seventh layer, I want to talk here about the invocation of angels, also known as Enochian magic, which was created by the astronomer, mathematician, and advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, or John Dee, together with the alchemist and seer, Edward Kelly. It's called Enochian magic after Enoch, who is said to have been taken to the heavens and seen and spoken with angels. And unlike medieval grimoires that used Latin and Greek, here in Enochian magic, they use their own language. According to John Dee himself, it would be the language that was used at the time of the Tower of Babel, the so-called celestial language, or the language of Adam. Enochian magic is based on the premise that the universe is governed by celestial beings in a certain hierarchy. And these hierarchies are linked to tables of numbers and letters. And depending on the phonetic vibration, you can open portals to communicate with these hierarchies. The structure of the invocation is based on a few pillars. For example, the tools, like the Sigillum Dei Ameth, which would be the seal of God's truth, which would be a large wax disc that has several names inscribed on it, like those of angels, archangels, etc. It would serve as a base for a crystal ball for scrying, and the table of Tom Tabernator, which would be a wooden table engraved with Enochian symbols, and also surrounded by protective seals. And we also have the Great Table, which in this case, the Enochian universe is divided into 4 quadrants. Each one is connected to an element of nature, right? Water, earth, fire, and air. They are represented by a large table full of anagrams. And by unraveling these anagrams, you will discover the names of the governors, the princes, and the kings of each cosmic region. And lastly, we have the Enochian keys. To summon the angels, the person there has to recite the 19 Enochian keys. The first 18 would be just for you to open the elemental gates. Then, for the last one, you would have to adjust the pronunciation depending on the region you want to access. In this case, the cosmic regions, right? The ethers, which would be 30. You have to be extremely precise with the pronunciation because otherwise it will ruin everything. Well, now let's move on to the witch's alphabet, also called the Honorius manuscript. According to what they say, in the Middle Ages, the church was hunting magicians, and the sworn book of Honorius arose as a reaction to that. A supposed convention of magicians would have gathered and put all their art into a single book, and they made a blood oath. That's why the book was called the Sworn Book. Only 3 copies could circulate worldwide at any time. If the owner was dying, he should bury the book or pass it on to a trustworthy successor. If it fell into the wrong hands, the magician would be cursed. Well, in that manuscript, the most dangerous conjurations, potion recipes, and the names of new demons were encoded using a certain alphabet. Because if the inquisitor or a curious person confiscated the manuscript, he would only see strange symbols that looked like scribbles or witchcraft marks. For the magus, it was just an encrypted writing to protect the secret of the circle. And this is where things get tricky because the Sworn Book of Honorius set out one of the longest and most exhausting operations of medieval magic to achieve what it calls the beatific vision, which is direct conversation with God and his angels. The book claims that the common words of our language have no power over the spiritual world, and that's why it creates huge tables with hidden and secret names of God and the angels. The name mixes corruptions of Hebrew, Greek, and Chaldean terms like Agla, Adonai, Alpha, and Omega, and huge variations of up to 100 letters. To conjure any spirit, the angel or the magician didn't ask politely. He would vibrate the specific hidden name that exercised direct authority over that astral legal entity. There was even the magician's own hidden name, right? Because when he was in a trance, in that case, he should use another name, his own hidden name. Angels normally are sexless, or at least they aren't supposed to be, right? They don't have a defined gender. However, there is a female angel among the various angels who are usually depicted as men, right? That's the case with Jophiel. She is a figure who usually appears in mystical and esoteric traditions of Judaism and Christianity. She is often associated with enlightenment, wisdom, and luck. Later, in mystical tradition and historical literature, some points about Jophiel stand out. For example, she would be the angel who accompanied Adam and Eve when they were leaving Eden. She would be a companion of Metatron. In Kabbalah, he is described as one of the great princes of heaven, a companion of Metatron, one of the highest-ranking angels in heaven, and one of the leaders of the choir of cherubim and thrones. In the Christian tradition, in the more esoteric line, in Sodom and Gomorrah, according to ancient legends, they say that Jophiel was one of the 7 archangels who took part in the destruction of the biblical cities at God's own command. In modern esoteric literature, in works such as Angel of Love and Light, Jophiel is considered the archangel of the second ray, the yellow ray, the golden ray, which governs wisdom, discernment, enlightenment, and constancy. He would be the patron of the archangels. Artists as well, due to his name meaning beauty of God, Jophiel is venerated as the protector of artists. In other associations, such as more historical occultists like Paracelsus and Francis Barré, Jophiel would have planetary aspects. Paracelsus described him as being the intelligence of Jupiter, acting as the ruler of this planet when it passes through the signs of Pisces. and Sagittarius, commanding 53 legions of angels. He is also associated with the sign of Libra and is considered a protector in pair amulets. If you've watched this far, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, like and share as well. See you next time.